Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the last of our presentations on this shift in social policy, best described under the heading of neoliberalism. Most of my viewers are actually management students, so managers' perspectives in this video. Let's think about managing. I'll tell you about new public management. It's not actually new anymore, it's old public management now. I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about an interesting ism, managerialism. Let's kick off with this new public management idea. Have you heard of this term? You might have, and even if you've never read an English book in your life, German authors often use the English original when they talk about this concept. So have you heard of it? What does the term mean? Could you define it? And if you can, of course, we have to define it with reference to old public management. What was the management that came before this? Have a head scratch. Final question related to this topic: what German reform did this coincide with? Because there was a kind of German version of this that we had a few years back. How can we define it? Spontaneously, I would define it as follows. The idea of learning from business. So think about public sector management. I'm working for a university, and that's a public sector organization. If you want to think about managing a university or managing some kind of state hospital, managing some kind of, social services department, or Jugendamt also fits here. How do we manage such organizations? This new public management is a form of public sector management, moving away from bureaucratic administration traditions. So one of my questions was, what was old public management? Old public management was largely a question of running a bureaucracy. So we're going to move away from this idea of running a bureaucracy, away from that idea, away from that tradition. And instead, we're going to be embracing, which suggests hugging with energy, embracing what? Embracing business approaches, embracing entrepreneurial private sector management practices. It's designed to make public bodies more efficient and more effective. This is something that politicians often repeated back at the time when this was an innovation, making our public bodies more efficient, more effective, more economical, more dynamic, more business-like, for short. In Germany, we had a reform that kind of came parallel to this trend. We had the Neues Steuerungsmodell. That was a local government reform with various dimensions. And it's well worth familiarizing yourself with that concept and what it brought to Germany. There you are. Once again, like many of these neoliberal shifts, not necessarily a made in Germany creation. This is something that was, a big thing in Britain back in the 20th century, came to Germany maybe something like 10 years later. So that was new public management. And now I've got this fascinating ism word. New public management is often spoken synonymously with managerialism. The two words are often used in the same breath. Discuss with your partner, what on earth could this managerialism mean? What could it mean? I'll give you a clue. What are isms? You say ismus in German. What does ism actually mean when you get it in a term? Scratch your heads, natter with your partner. What did you come up with? The Oxford English Dictionary definition of managerialism: belief in or reliance on the use of professional managers in administering or planning an activity. And latently, there's this idea that we believe in them or we rely on these managers too much. Ism often has that meaning of too much, okay? So popularism is when I'm trying too hard to be popular. Communism is thinking about a community in an extreme, exaggerated sense. These isms often describe taking an idea and really doing it to excess. So a kind of excessive reliance on managers and what they do. Interesting translation questions. Scratch your heads, discuss with your partner, what's the German equivalent of the term managerialism? Do you have an expression, not necessarily an ism, but a term describing this trend? Running an organization, which is not a business, strictly speaking, but running it like a private sector profit-making business. Any German concepts here? Scratch your head, pause here. What did you come up with? It's worth noting we already have a German word. It's a very interesting German word. Look at this, Ökonomisierung. And that describes almost exactly the same thing. One German author I was reading noted, what we're describing here is a kind of BWLisierung, which is also a very nice way of saying it, very descriptive term that. So it's not pretty, but Visualisierung. You can really get a feeling for how that term managerialism sounds to English native speakers. This is actually a good idea. Another nice question for you as social work managers. What do you think, all in all, is private sector management, is business management, you know, running a bank, running EasyJet, is that model a good model for social work agencies to copy? You know, should we all be more like Ryanair? Not this month, obviously, but you know what I mean. Is this a good model for, say, social work and social care agencies to copy? Natter with your neighbour. I'm not going to answer that question directly, but you can answer it either way. You can make powerful arguments that there are parallels there, you know, that one of these two models can learn from the other. On the other hand, you know, you could answer in the negative. There's so many differences between a social care agency, a social work agency, and a private sector business. So I'll happily accept answers going in either direction. Let me tell you about some interesting literature from the English-speaking world, I think from Britain actually, on all my cases here. And this is a nice starting point. Look at this for a book title. Harris, who co-penned the dictionary that I was using earlier, he talks about the social work business. 2003 text. For Harris, together, managerialism has led to the social work business. Business thinking, claims Harris, is taking over every part of social work. So there's a kind of colonization process here. Social work's being colonized by this business thinking. Managers, they're being given more and more power. Social workers, in contrast, they're losing their power. They're losing their professional autonomy. Other concepts that kind of go hand in hand with this managerialism, look at this for another word, marketization. Once again, easily translatable from Marketization is the German term. Have a look, natter with your neighbor. What on earth might this refer to? What trend is this describing? Scratch your heads together. What did you come up with? What we're mapping here is some kind of rise or increase in markets in social work and social care. So agencies are now competing with one another. So some needy person needs to be helped, and different agencies all have to compete to win that client, delivering those services efficiently and effectively. In other words, the idea of choice is being promoted. The service user, in our new language, and I stress new, the service user is now a customer. The service user or the service purchaser. The service purchaser is a contractor, so to say, outsourcing. You know, this is the modern jargon, the modern business jargon of social work. The service purchaser, the contractor, chooses from a market of agencies in competition. So we're using the natural competition within the marketplace, and the service user is buying in the service that they prefer, or in some cases, the service purchaser is buying it in for them. So markets and social work and social care. And again, we've got lots of other buzzwords, you know, all coming from, I think, the early 1990s, maybe very late 1980s, early 1990s from the English language, mixed markets of care or welfare pluralism to describe how different kinds of agency, state, voluntary sector, non-profit, so to say, but also private sector agencies, profit-making agencies, might all be providing various welfare services. Another nice book, which I've got on my bookshelf, which I can utterly recommend, you'll find it in the library as well. Key Trends in Social Work Management by the same author, Harris, 4 years later. This is a lovely collection of papers on social work management. And although it's 13 years old, I can still utterly recommend it. He was thinking about the trends that he was observing in the early 2000s. He pins it down to 7. I think this is interesting. He notes competition. Of course, this is referring to this market idea I've just mentioned, agencies competing with one another, contracting. Instead of providing a service themselves, agencies tend to sell that service provision to somebody else. So they get a contract with another agency to provide that service. Consumerism, this idea of the service user being a consumer, you know, customer is king, so to say, the sovereign customer. Performance indicators, you might want to scratch your heads and translate that into German. These are the numbers that business people use to describe the efficiency of their service delivery. They're trying to measure how good they're providing their services. We can often reduce these things down to concrete numbers. This point sounds quite silly, but Harris means it with the utmost of seriousness, more work. Increased scrutiny. Scrutiny is about checking, looking, watching. Okay, so this is a kind of idea for monitoring, checking, surveillance either. And that has various dimensions. You know, it could be using information technology, or it could be scrutiny through, for example, the media. The last one, gatekeeping and rationing. You know, think of the nightclub bouncer that says to some of the guests standing in the queue, sorry, you can't come in. It's the same trend that we're seeing in social work management. We used to try and give services to everybody who was needy, and that's a thing of the past. We're now being more selective. We'll say to some of our clients, sorry, you know, we can't help you. We can't offer you this service. So going back to 2007, that was what Harris was observing. I think many of those points are still very, very relevant today, although by now these trends really have become somewhat everyday, and they've kind of like become solid as being part of the social work delivery of services. We've mentioned charity and competition. I had a very strange experience going to an English supermarket a few years ago. A morning trip to your local supermarket. When I paid, I was given one of these funny little green tokens. I asked, what am I supposed to do with this? And the cashier told me, pop it in one of the slots in the collection point when you leave the supermarket. And as I left the supermarket, I passed this perspex, this transparent plastic box here, and I was encouraged to look at a text on 3 different charities and then decide which charity I liked best. And then I would put my chip in, and they would get presumably a couple of cents from the supermarket for their good work. Isn't it fascinating how obviously if one of the charities was promoting its concept better, their little perspex compartment could get much more full, and they could get more of our green chips. So another very, very strange, and again for me, typically British reminder of this world of competition in social work and social care. I hope you've enjoyed these presentations. Once again, there's a whole bunch of interesting reading for you, and I'm going to be making some of this available to you as well. Hope you've enjoyed these talks. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.